Does
Okay,
it tell
fine.
you that yet? Yep, there we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Climate Action Brookline's meeting for February 2024. Climate Action Brookline meets once a month for an informational meeting like this. At CAB, by the way, we're working on several climate projects. We would love to have everybody join us. Our topic tonight is climate responsible uses of and generation of electricity. Our speakers are State Representative Tommy Vitolo, who is, I'm going to introduce everybody very quickly at the very beginning. State Representative Tommy Vitolo is everywhere all the time. He probably called you on your birthday. Before his election to the State House, he served as a professional consultant on energy issues statewide and nationwide. Also tonight, Vikram Agarwal, a founder or perhaps the founder of Energy Sage, which bills itself as a marketplace for eco-energy systems, both, I think, generation and consumption of electricity, and a Brookline resident. Vikram's views on climate responsible energy systems have been sought by major national news outlets, many of which have quoted him directly. When I told Vikram he was a rock star, he looked at me very sternly and he said, "Not a rock star, a subject matter expert." Then we will hear from Susan Martin and Diane Sokol, who will tell us about Electrify Brookline, a major information sharing project several months in the making of how-tos to suggest ways you can transition things in your life so it runs increasingly on climate responsible systems. And then your questions. And Fran, you win the prize of questions submitted in advance, so we'll put you on first in the questions. But first, to very quickly set up the discussion this evening, I'd like to make two very quick but important points. And I am going to share my screen. There it is. Good. Okay. Does everybody see a slide that says greenhouse gas emission snapshot?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, this is really, really interesting in my view. If you look at it, they're talking about four major sectors. The first, transportation, is responsible for 37% of statewide greenhouse gas emissions. Buildings, 35% of statewide emissions. Electric power, 20% of statewide emissions. And finally, everything else, 8%. Now, the big three emission sources in Massachusetts, transportation, buildings, and electric power, are responsible for 92% of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. Our speakers today will be speaking, I'm sure, about matters in all three of those areas. So this is fantastic. Let me get back to my notes. So basically, where do I do this now? I think I'm going to unshare my screen so things get a little... If I can do that. Stop sharing. There we go. Okay, good. Okay. As I say, the big three generate 92% of greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. So any effective climate response must include robust initiatives to reduce greenhouse gases in all three areas. Now, what can we do in Brookline? We have had multiple initiatives begun by climate groups like Climate Action Brookline and Brookline Mothers Out Front, and by unaffiliated residents over the last, really, since starting about the year 2000, honestly. Now, we need to make sure we're all working together, and we all need to make sure we adequately cover the big three emission sources. How? Well, in 2017, Brookline signed the Paris Climate Agreement. And then in 2018, the very next year, Brookline submitted a climate action plan to the Paris people. Now, Paris wants all signatories to update their plans every 5 years. We should have done that last year, 2023. We're a year late, but now we're beginning to go great guns. The 2023-24 Climate Action Plan Update Project will be a year-long project. It's just beginning. Hopefully, it will involve every single person in Brookline, and hopefully will culminate in an updated plan or elements of a plan, perhaps at the November town meeting. Climate Action Brookline and Brookline Mothers Out Front will present our initial recommendations tomorrow morning at a meeting of the Zero Emissions Advisory Board at 10 a.m. tomorrow, in person at Town Hall Room 310. Love to have folks join us. That would be fantastic, but that's only the first of many, many opportunities for folks to present ideas and to volunteer. And your views on how to address the climate crisis will be actively sought out. So I've been talking too long. So now let us go to our speakers. And first, State Representative Tommy Vitolo, please.
Well, good afternoon. I know nearly everyone, there's a few folks I haven't met, and so I hope I will soon. That slide that John showed, the key takeaway is electricity, buildings, and transportation emissions have to go to zero. Zero. That means every building you use has to go to zero. That means every private transportation you use will sort of leave mass transit on a separate plane, on a separate item, have to go to zero, right? And that means the electricity in the grid has to go to zero emissions, zero tons of CO2 per unit of energy used. And that's the easiest for electric generation. That's the easiest of the three for a variety of reasons, not limited to. There are relatively few power plants in the domain, whether it's the state, the country, the world, as compared to the number of buildings or the number of vehicles. And also, they have a smaller number of owners, and they're more highly regulated. So the vision is green the electricity grid, and at the same time, because as adults, as human beings, we can do more than one thing at a time, electrify everything, right? And if we make our electric grid zero emissions, and if everything runs on electricity, we have zero emissions. Now, there's a little bit of hand waving there, but that's the big vision, right? And so then the question becomes, well, what should we electrify and in what order? And I want to sort of put it in share with you a perspective that has nothing to do with energy, that has to do with finance. And then I'm going to let Vikram talk for a while, then I'll come back. If you have 4 or 5 credit cards with revolving debt, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to pay down my credit card debt. And you go to anyone who knows anything about finance, they will all tell you the same thing. Stack them up, and whichever credit card has the highest interest rate, after you've done paying the minimum payment for all the other cards, pay as much as you can on that one. And that if you use this strategy of always paying all the extra money you have on the highest interest rate credit card, you'll pay off your debt with the least amount of total dollars and the fastest. And everybody who knows anything about finance will tell you that. And there's nothing incorrect about that. I will remind you, though, that we are all human beings. We are not finance geeks, most of us. And we have other priorities, and we have emotions, and we respond to stimuli as human beings differently than people who only think about compound interest. So there's a whole totally different strategy. And that strategy is you stack up all your credit cards from the least debt to the biggest debt. And after you've done paying your minimums, you pay your least debt credit card first, regardless of the interest rate. And the theory is you'll pay it off the soonest. And that will give you a charge. That will make you excited. That will keep you motivated. And that will help you keep going down this path. And then you pay down the second smallest bill. And in this way, it will take you a little bit longer. It will cost you a little bit more money, but it will provide you with this thrill, this dopamine to keep going. My point is simply that if you only listen to engineers to tell you the way to do this, it's not actually going to work, because we're human beings and we respond to very different kinds of stimulus in different times. So we should weigh what the financiers and the engineers say and take it very seriously. And then we should also think about the other things that we care about in our life. We might do an electric vehicle sooner because it just sounds like it's fun to drive. Or we might do solar panels sooner because they are visible from the street and we want our neighbors to know how much we care. They may or may not be the things that are the most efficient from a finance or an engineering perspective. That may not be the order we choose because we're human beings and we respond to different kinds of emotions in different ways. And we have spouses and we have family members and we have different circumstances. So I just say, whatever you learned today from Vikram and myself, always remember that in your story, the order may be different for a reason that isn't specifically related to finance or tons of carbon. But if that's what helps you get all the things done, get everything to zero on the path that you're on, I say that's the right path for you. Vikram, what do you think?
Right on. Hello, everyone. Really excited to be participating in this meeting today. I'm going to be a little bit slower than usual. I'm dealing with a bit of flu. So anyway, I'm Vikram Agarwal, as John mentioned. My background is I started a company called Energy Sage about 15 years ago, which ended up becoming the country's largest marketplace, was helping homeowners and businesses and municipalities install solar energy systems, heat pumps, community solar, and now electric vehicle charging and other broader electrification products and services. So I've recently joined the ZEAB in Brookline, and two of my fellow board members are also on the call today, Werner and Kathleen. So folks, keep me honest if I say something out of left field. Please jump in and correct me. So at ZEAB, we have been working for the last several months on trying to determine what are the actions that Brookline residents, both homeowners and businesses, and even municipal buildings, should take to reduce our carbon emissions. So that has been the crux of our work over the last several months. And we've been working on trying to determine what is the best way to determine what should we do first. And Tommy, as you mentioned, so finance is front and center of those discussions. So having worked in energy and getting people to adopt renewable energy and broader electrification over the last 15 years, what I've learned is people are very self-centered. People are very selfish. They make their decisions based on what is good for them and then their pocketbook. No surprise there, just like Tommy was suggesting. So over the years, what we found was that there are four primary reasons people, as I said, both homeowners and businesses, end up adopting renewable energy technologies. The number one reason, which is by far the most important for most of the folks, is financial savings. Will this help me save money? So that's number one. And if you look at the total population of all homeowners, renters, businesses, and you ask them, what is the most important thing for you? That is the answer that you always get. There are three other answers, three other reasons why they get interested in renewable energy. But those three are not in any order of priority. It is always dependent on that particular individual. What are the rank order of those three other reasons? And again, will not come to you as a surprise. The other three reasons are sustainability, that people want to live sustainably. Number three is resilience. People are quite worried about making sure that they have power when they need it. A lot of things in their homes are now running on electricity. So want to make sure that they are always covered, that if there are power outages, and especially around the country, our grid is getting quite old and is consistently failing in different parts of the country. So these people are looking for resiliency. And last but not the least is comfort and convenience and control, if you will. So what we found over the years was that people got interested in renewables, electrification, whatever you want to call it, climate tech, because of one of those four reasons. But the biggest reason that drove their decision to invest and take action was driven by financial results. So again, we are in Brookline. We are a very unique town. I think we are maybe more than, we are definitely more middle to upper middle income, even wealthier town. People have more means than other people living in other towns. So we do have the ability to spend a little bit more to take climate action. But when you look at, call it the total population of 100, I would say maybe there are 5, 10, 15, 20% of the people who are willing to take action, even if it means that it will not give them financial returns. But the other 80% or more are always looking for that reason, that financial reason to take action. So that has been one of the key factors that we have been thinking about as ZEAB thinks about which actions should be prioritized. Which of these actions will deliver immediate financial returns to whoever it is? Is it the residents, the businesses, the municipality to take action? It will actually save them money. It will be easy to finance. That there are, because a lot of these projects can be quite expensive. Will there be financing available to make these investments? How easy is it to get these projects in place? We would love to show progress right away. We would love to show how that we are actually making a difference and we are getting folks to take action. So those are some of the things that we are working on at ZEAB. One other thing I would like to say, and then maybe open it up for questions, is a lot of the decisions, the broader electrification decisions, are now becoming interconnected. So let's say if you were thinking of buying an electric car. If you buy an electric car, your electricity cost is going to go up. And as you may know, in Massachusetts especially, our electricity rates have gone up pretty substantially over the last several years. So the electric cars are definitely cheaper to operate. It used to be that they were about 4 times cheaper to operate than internal combustion cars. But looking at our Massachusetts electricity rates, now the difference is maybe 2x. So they're only 2 times cheaper than ability to operate an internal combustion engine car. Same things with the heat pumps. Heat pumps are a great product. They have excellent technology, helps you live quite comfortably. But again, they use electricity. And with higher electricity costs, it is, for some homeowners, it is becoming a little bit of a challenge to move from a gas heating system to a heat pump system. But if you had solar installed on your home, or you were buying solar electricity either through a community solar project, or you have solar on your own roof, then the economics get tremendously, significantly better. Then your electric car is now 8 times cheaper to operate than internal combustion cars. Your heat pumps are significantly cheaper to operate than your gas furnace. So I'll stop here right now. I know there's plenty of discussion to be had.
So I'd like to sort of put one more framework out there to think about, and that is this. Most of the things that you own that consume significant amounts of energy are capital items. They don't wear out every year. Your automobile, your water heater, your space heating, right? These are things that you buy once in a long while, and man, you got to reach deep in the pocketbook when you do, because these are typically the exception of the water heater, these are 5-figure expenditures, right? These are things that cost tens of thousands of dollars, right? At least 10,000. And fortunately, they don't wear out every year because that would be really expensive, right? If we are going to decarbonize by 2050, then the question is, how many chances will you have to replace each of those capital items by 2050? Well, an automobile, probably, it's 2024, you will own more than one automobile beyond the one you have now between now and 2050. You will probably not just get one more new car, whether it's new to you or brand new, between now and 2050, if you're like most people. Similarly, water heaters tend to wear out many of them, the tanked ones, wear out every 10 years and 6 months because they got a 10-year warranty. Space heaters, on the other hand, often last 25 years, right? So probably you will only replace the space heating equipment in your house, the boiler, the furnace, whatever, one time between now and 2050. And so in that context, another way to think about it is ask yourself, how many chances will I have to replace each of these items between now and 2050? And if the answer is 1, well, when that thing wears out, you better be ready to replace it with an electric version. Because if you don't, you will still have that fossil fuel burner in your home well past the date when you know you can do that from if not from a legal or a financial perspective, frankly, from a moral perspective. And so that means working backwards. It also means guessing or being prepared for the failure of this equipment. And you may not know when it's going to fail. And when it fails, you need to be ready. If your heating system fails in winter, you don't have a lot of time to deal with that, right? And so working backwards to make sure that when that piece of capital equipment fails, particularly if this is the last chance to replace it with an electric version before 2050, you are ready. And that might mean before you do anything, you have to spend money with no financial return to upgrade your circuit panel, right? To make sure the wiring in your house is ready so that when your stove goes, you're like, all right, I'm putting in an induction cooktop, you're ready to go. Or you're willing to wait a couple of weeks for an electrician and, just hit the takeout, all those restaurants we were talking about earlier. So that's another way to think about it. The exception, of course, are new things that you're not replacing. Solar panels, if you don't already have solar panels, that's a totally different kind of calculation because you could add those on any time. And then, that's a different thinking. But if you know you're going to replace your furnace in 3 years, maybe this isn't the year to do solar panels because you're getting ready for that. So thinking about these capital expenses and slotting them, scheduling them, planning for them, something that folks who have a little more money and a little more stability in their life have the luxury of being able to do, and it's worth doing. So that's another way to think about timing when you're going to do what and how that fits into all of the other things you want to do with your home and your life.
All right, fantastic. Now that we are all trembling with uncertainty, my space heater is going to die tomorrow or whatever, or next year or whatever. As it happens, the good people of Electrify Brookline have been working on a way to help you with with some good updated information. And now I wonder if Diane Sokol and Susan Martin can tell us about the Electrify Brookline campaign. And Diane, I understand. Yep, there you go. You can share your screen. Yep.
So I'm Susan Martin. I think most of you know me. I'm a longtime CAB member and also a member of Mothers Out Front. So thanks, John, for inviting us to speak about Electrify Brookline tonight. We have a quick presentation. Some of you may have seen this before, but we include some new information as well. So we'll start with some background to explain the context of the campaign. So next slide, Diane. The background for kind of how we approached this is that the Massachusetts 2050 decarbonization roadmap, which you see an image of here. Massachusetts has a legal mandate to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And Brookline actually has an accelerated timeline for achieving that goal by 2040. So the Commonwealth published this decarbonization roadmap. It's a very detailed plan to eliminate climate damaging emissions. The roadmap outlines 4 big efforts. Number 1 is reduce energy demand. Number 2 is electrify everything. Number 3 is use 100% renewable electricity. And number 4 is sequester carbon. The first three steps are the ones that the Electrify Brookline campaign is really trying to help residents in Brookline address. They are, we think, achievable and climate responsible.
Great. So if we start with the first one, reduce energy demand, that means using less energy, whether that's through energy conservation, energy efficiency, and also non-emitting transportation. So you can see photos here of simple ways to reduce your energy demand in your home and your transportation. And further steps to reduce our home's energy demand is through weatherization. That's insulation and air sealing. And we like to remind people, your house is an essential part of your heating system. That means the more attention you pay to weatherizing the outside of your home, the less energy you will need to heat or cool your house. And the Mass Save program covers 75 to 100% of the costs for recommended weatherization. So the first step really is to sign up for a free home energy assessment with Mass Save. And then the next principle, use 100% renewable electricity, making sure that the electricity that we use in our homes comes from clean, non-emitting sources like wind, solar, hydro. In Brookline, it's simple. Most of you already know about Brookline Green Electricity, and it's really just a small additional cost on your monthly electric bill. But again, the less electricity you use, the more energy efficiency you have, the less extra you'll pay for green electricity. So it's important to take those energy use reduction steps that you saw on the other two slides. And of course, a further step to use 100% renewable electricity is installing solar panels right on your own roof or joining a community solar. So now that we've taken those first two steps to reduce energy demand and use 100% renewable electricity, it's time to electrify everything. So wherever we're using fossil fuels in our lives, we will need to transition to all electric equipment. That's the stoves we cook with, our cars, our heating systems, also our water heaters and our clothes dryers. In order to reach these 2050 climate goals or Brookline's 2040 goals, we need to electrify all of Brookline's homes and apartments in the next 20 years. That's a massive task, or actually 16 years at this point.
So Mothers Out Front Brookline, a number of months ago, asked our members, what barriers might you have that are preventing you from taking steps to electrify? And the number one response was the lack of information about how to get started and how to figure out all the details. People asked for easy to follow instructions, for explanations of the options available. And renters and condo owners also wanted to know what they would be able to do. And of course, understanding financing and the rebates that might be available and finding contractors were also among the top concerns. But the information with gap was something that we could address, and that spurred several of us to begin researching, planning, and writing a series of how-to guides. So Brookline Mothers Out Front joined up with Climate Action Brookline and with the town's Zero Emissions Advisory Board and worked to produce a series of how-to guides to inform people of the why, and importantly, the how, to electrify their homes, their apartments, their condos, and to make them more energy efficient. On Brookline Day last September, CAB, Mothers Out Front, and ZEAB had tables right next to each other, and we all promoted the newly launched how-to guides. We made posters. The big one shown on the right was in the Walgreens window for a while, and now I believe is still up at Town Hall. And we had flyers and samples of the guides and so forth. Our volunteers walked around with sandwich boards, actually announcing the great news that Brookline actually has climate solutions. It was a really great opportunity for outreach to the community, even despite the rain. Since there are many climate initiatives that we're working on together, it was great to have our tents and our tables together. And after a summer of news headlines about too much heat, too much rain, too many wildfires, our neighbors came to these tables and asked, what can I do to get involved? And they were the first to hear about the new initiative called Electrify Brookline. So we call the campaign Electrify Brookline. Simple, straightforward, we hope. And we have a tagline that's promoting a healthy, energy efficient, fossil fuel free community. The guides are available on the town's website. So you simply need to Google Electrify Brookline, and the first result that comes up will take you to the town's website with a page that is about Electrify Brookline. And you will see on here a list of the guides that are currently available. There are actually 9 of them. The first one is all about what Tommy was talking about, thinking about your own home, your own residence, your own apartment, your own condo, and thinking about what is your plan. When can you do what you need to do or would like to do? So the next slide, Diane. Every guide that is on there starts by explaining the topic. The example that I'm showing here is about heat pump water heaters. So some people may not know that there is such a thing as a heat pump water heater. So we try to explain what that is. We talk about how it can help the climate. We talk about what's involved in making the switch. It contains sections outlining some of the choices that there are, approximate costs. Is there associated electrical work that you need to think about doing? And last but not least, a summary of available rebates and incentives that can help finance the work. Each guide also contains stories of how your Brookline neighbors made the switch. So, the information that we have in here is relevant to many communities, but the stories about how people have done the work in Brookline we felt was really important to include. Since every home is different and the equipment can offer different choices, we tried to include stories of a number of different residents who approach the same task. So in addition to the how-to guides, we developed a checklist for making a plan, as Tommy was talking about, that corresponds to the guides. It provides a menu of options and helps you think about where you might want to start or be able to start and how to plan out your steps.
There are a few other resources that are also available on the Climate Action Brookline and Mothers Out Front websites, and there will be more to come. So what you're seeing here is a resource about financial incentives. We combined all the info about rebates and tax credits from the separate guides, put them all together in one document. And we want to make sure that everyone knows about these substantial rebates and tax credits for electrification projects. There's money from Mass Save, as well as federal money from the Inflation Reduction Act. And our message on the financing is don't leave easy money on the table. Making an investment in electrification is good for the climate, it's good for your comfort and health, and it's also good for the economy. So the CAB and Mothers Out Front websites also post the checklist that Susan was showing, the Make a Plan, and a document with some frequently asked questions. And our work continues. We have more guides to come, specific resource guides for renters, for condo owners, and for landlords, plus another how-to guide on electric vehicles and chargers. We'll continue our Brookline outreach, precinct by precinct, neighborhood by neighborhood, just to let people know about the guides and how to make a plan. We're organizing some presentations over Zoom or maybe even in person, and we'll soon launch a list of contractors that have been used by our Brookline neighbors for electrification projects. So if you've put in insulation or a heat pump water heater or an EV charger, Susan's going to drop a link into the chat. You can fill out this Google form to tell us about the contractors that you've used. And we're hoping to make this list public by March 1st. We're also looking at ways to collect data on home electrification in Brookline to chart the progress that we're making towards the town's 2040 net zero goals and to inspire more action. So we're always looking for more volunteers in the Electrify Brookline team. So if you have any interest, let us know if you want to join our campaign. So thanks for letting us share this info. We're happy to hear your thoughts and any questions you may have. And I will stop the share at this point.
All right, thank you. So we're now at the question and answer part of the evening. If you have a question, please use your digital hand there. I want to be fair to everybody. I did tell Fran that because she submitted questions in advance, she could be first. But Fran, if you don't mind, I've got two kind of quick, quick responses. First of all, for the EB, the Electrified Brookline people, some of your documents apparently are via the Town of Brookline website, but others are via the cab and Mothers Out Front. I wonder if you could just clarify what can be found where.
Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, I'd say the introductory guide, which is guide number 0, and then the 8 guides that we have so far, how-to guides, those are all on the town website. What's available on cab and Mothers Out Front, plus the checklist. The cab and Mothers Out Front website also has that checklist, some frequently answered questions, some more information on financial incentives. And the contractors list will probably sit on cab and Mothers Out Front websites.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And now just also a really quick one for probably Tommy and or Vikram, which is for Brookline in 2024 and no, I'm sorry, for Brookline in 2040, and then for the state of Mass in 2050, we all turn into pumpkins. And my question is this. On those years, will all of the existing natural gas pipelines be discontinued, or how is that? What is going to happen regarding that?
The short answer is we have no idea.
Okay.
Individuals may have theories or projections or preferences, but in fact, public policy, either from the state or from the gas companies themselves, does not explicitly say with certainty, with bindable certainty, what will happen. I will tell you, though, that the fewer customers on the gas line and the less gas each customer uses, the farther along that journey we are, and the more pressure regulators, legislators, and gas company employees have to figure out what comes next, because they've got to figure out how to pay for those fixed and annual CapEx, capital expenditure costs on fewer and fewer customers, and that gets tougher and tougher.
Thank you.
So there are, I'll just add a little bit. I've had some discussions with few utility folks. There are a couple of things that are challenging the utilities when it comes to gas. Number one, I think we all have, I bet, experienced the smell of gas as we are walking down different streets in Brookline. So we have very leaky pipelines, and the cost to fix those leaky pipelines is humongous. It will if the Public Utilities Commissions and if the government of Massachusetts or towns of Brookline require these utilities to fix every leak, it can have maybe two potential outcomes. One is put these gas companies at risk because they just don't have enough money to fix all these leaks. Or number two is that cost is passed along to everybody else, to every customer. In both cases, I think neither of these are, depending on your viewpoint, maybe quite a big challenge. So there was one. So that's a big challenge that may drive what happens to gas companies in the next several years. The other is the demand for electricity, as we are talking about, is going up every day. More people are buying electric cars, more people are installing heat pumps, electric hot water systems. We just don't have enough generation. And So that is also causing a very big challenge for the utilities, not only enough generation, enough distribution capacity because of our aging grid. So those are some things that are really challenging the utilities on they want more electrification, but at the same time, they don't know how they will be able to meet the demand of increased electricity.
Thank you. So Fran, you've got 3 questions. Can you combine them or streamline them somehow?
Can I
or-
make a statement first?
Okay,
So I hope you guys consider what I'm gonna say and don't throw too many rotten tomatoes. But I wonder how often you've listened to people like myself who believe that we should do something about the climate, but also understand that, I'm sorry, Vikram, Brookline has some really rich people, but not everybody's rich. And all these efforts are really burdensome on people of lower income and seniors, people who want to age in their homes. And it's not very easy to consider how to deal with those issues. And I also would recommend, has your group ever had a discussion at the senior center to hear a different point of view? Whenever I've looked at your agendas, you're all talking amongst the people who believe wholeheartedly in everything you're doing without thinking about the consequences on those who would find it difficult. So that's my statement. My question is, some of the electrified Brookline guides are great, but I looked at the one for rewiring, and it assumes that you don't live in a house like I do that's 125 years old that has 60 amps electric, and it assumes that you already have 100 or 200 amp service, and all you have to do is spend $10,000 to get more electric and upgrade your circuit breaker. In situations like my house and many other of the Victorians, we would have to rewire our entire homes. And the price that I was quoted 3 years ago, before prices went up, was $65,000. So my question is, can you adjust the electrifying your house guide to mention that it assumes your internal wiring is already up to date, and if it's not, that's another expense you need to consider. So that was one point. My second point was just a question on, and to go back to that, it's an equity and ageism question, because it's the poor people in town, the seniors, who can't afford these things. And if you want to get it done and have zero emissions, you need to figure out how to support those who can't do it themselves. Then my second, that's sort of a question statement. My question then is, if you do heat pumps, okay, most of the older homes in Brookline are heated by radiators with hot water. Does a heat pump work in that system? Or do you have to install all new heating ducts and everything? And those were basically my issues. And I really encourage you to try to expand your outlook to other people so you can hear stories of what other people think and the problems they see. Because from my perspective, nothing in your literature or anything you discuss or say sort of thinks about people who can't afford it, or seniors who want to stay in, age in place. And I think that perspective needs to be listened to.
So I'll take a couple of swings at a few of the parts. The first thing to say is you're absolutely right that people in Brookline and everywhere else in the Commonwealth span the spectrum of age, of wealth, which is different than of income, and frankly, of sort of the wherewithal to do this kind of project management in their own home. Some people, they can afford it, but it's really overwhelming and they would just much rather think about something else altogether, right? So these are all real. And since we've got to get to zero with everybody, we've got to embrace the realities facing all of these different kinds of people. You're absolutely right. With respect to your Victorian or anyone else's Victorian or my house, which is about 110 years old and not a Victorian, every house is different. And so what your house needs, frankly, nobody can really be sure until they go in your house with a flashlight and start poking around and really look at what your circuit panel looks like and really look for knob and tube wiring or evidence of knob and tube and all of these things. So the cost, we can guess from a Google map or we can guess from the age of the home, but it's going to vary widely, and it's really every story is going to be different. With respect to radiators and heat pumps, yes, there are heat pump systems that tie in directly to both steam and hot water radiators. They are a little more exotic. There's fewer of them out in the wild, right? But they do exist. In fact, former town meeting member Jesse Gray, who lived over on Griggs Terrace, installed one about 2 years ago, and I've seen it work. He has since moved to the West Coast with his wife, but he's a person who you may have heard of. I will tell you that my house had radiators, and when we went to heat pumps primarily ducted, we removed the radiators because for us, we actually wanted the extra space in the house. It didn't seem like it would be a lot, but it turns out our rooms feel a lot bigger, and we like that. But other people are going to want to keep the radiators, and yes, that can be done. And the last thing I would say is, I have to say two more things. The first is that I'm working on a bill, not for this session, but for next session, that is specifically focused at the wire from the street to the house, the service wire, and the circuit panel to help everyone upgrade that equipment, regardless of how much money they've got rattling around in their piggy bank, because we've simply got to do that for everybody. But the last thing I would say is Mass Save. Call Mass Save. They'll come out, they'll take a look, and it'll be a place to start from an organization that, while imperfect, as all organizations are, has been working at this for a long time and is funded by the money you pay for your electricity and your natural gas. So in a sense, you've already paid for the service. You might as well have them come to your house and take a look and see what they have to say.
I appreciate it. I do know that there are different ways to do it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I personally could afford to electrify my house if I wanted to, but I'm not the average senior. I'm not the average person who's lived in a house for 40 years. And I, as a member of the Council on Aging, hear a lot of stories of how seniors are having problems. And also as a new town meeting member, I hear how a lot of the people in our community feel underrepresented because nobody considers the fact that they can't afford it.
I think people do consider it. I'm going to push back on that, Fran.
Yeah.
People do consider it. There's a tension for sure. I remind you, one of the first things Vikram said was the biggest driver for this is economics. And so the extent to which folks can find improvements that decarbonize and save money at the same time, sort of out of the gate, those are like A1, the ones that we want to go with. And that's everything from weatherization to solar panels, right? So for sure, it's complicated. For sure, different people have different ability to do something tomorrow. And absolutely, we've got to be thinking about everybody. But there is something for everyone.
Your program doesn't come out in a way that addresses people who think, right, yeah, where am I going to get $10,000? And
fair criticism.
You know,
Yeah.
And I think you need to reach out to those people and figure out ways of getting resources to them if you really want to make this happen.
Fran, I'll tell you, I think you have made your point very, very persuasively, and I think you've made it in a setting that can make a difference on that. So let's be in touch on that, okay?
Okay, John.
The next yellow hand is Alex.
Sorry, John, before
Yeah,
we
I'm sorry,
move on,
Vikram, sorry.
Yep. Sorry, just quickly, Fran.
Yeah, go ahead.
Completely understand what you're saying. Susan, question for you. Are the guides organized in such a way that can maybe highlight things that people can do that can be more affordable, positive ROI right away, things that people can then pick and choose what they may want to do first?
So each guide is targeted toward a specific project. So it's, there's a guide for heat pump water heater. There's a guide for heat pumps for heating and cooling and so forth. I think I take to heart what Fran is saying, and I will admit that for the moment, they are mostly targeted towards people who are homeowners and who have some means. But I take what she said to heart, and we'll be working on that.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback on that, we do emphasize, as Tommy emphasized, start with Mass Save. That can help you save money. Our checklist shows different things that renters can do. We have induction cooking kits available in all 3 Brookline libraries that people can borrow and use as an alternative to a gas stove. So, we're working on a renter's guide. We're trying to take multiple perspectives into account here.
Thank you. Next digital hand is Alok, please.
Hi, thank you so much for holding this forum. It's really helpful. Just a couple questions. I've been looking very carefully at solar, and I've had a number of contractors over measuring, looking at sunlight, coming up with proposals. I've been through them all, and it just really struck me as every contractor that I approached, it ended up feeling more like a financing contract than anything else. They just wanted to sign me up to something where I was paying monthly fees for a long period of time to pay for the solar panels, which were free, which clearly they were not. Doing the math, the payout was 20 plus years. There was no ability to sell power back into the grid. And storage was going to be a lot more money to get batteries to store power. So it was really just not an economically viable alternative, despite the fact that we pay quite a bit for our heating and our cooling. I also did go down the Massachusetts SAVE program. They gave me a handful of LED bulbs, and that was pretty much it. And so I was not that impressed with what they had to offer, to be honest. So I'm just wondering, for the folks that are really deep into this, what are some practical suggestions really to overcome these obstacles? Because these are obstacles that I can't overcome, and it's unless there's some practical solutions here, I feel like the majority of homeowners are driven by what Vikram said. The two major reasons are, one, savings, and two, having power security. These are just not obstacles that can be overcome. So I'm just curious how you experts, people that are experts in this field, how you think about this and how you would overcome these obstacles.
So look, maybe I can jump in here. So you got to find better contractors to get quotes from. Massachusetts is one of the best states in the country to install solar. I completely understand that depending on who you reached out to, how you found them, that they're trying to sell you a lease or a PPA. If you were to buy the system outright, a high quality system, your payback should be under 7 years. More like 5 to 7, depending on what price you end up paying. So I'm extremely surprised that, yes, that you, actually not surprised, I should say, that the contractors that you ended up finding are trying to sell you a bill of goods that is not right for you. And that is where I built Energy Sage just for that purpose, to make sure that people are protected and make the right decisions. Number two is same thing with the batteries, right? It's an information gap. In Massachusetts, we have what utilities call connected solutions, where if you allow the utility to tap your battery during the peak summer months for a few hours over a few weeks, your battery almost ends up being free to you. There is a 7-year no interest loan for the battery, especially if you allow the utility to tap into your battery. And that pays you enough to cover your cost of the battery. So long story short, I think finding the right contractors will make sure that you are getting the right solutions and make right decisions.
Vikram, if I could just pick up on a look question. You mentioned Energy Sage. You know, Alok is saying that there are contractors out there who really don't have the customer's best interest at heart. Is Energy Sage different from that? How is Energy Sage compensated for its work, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. And by the way, I'm no longer affiliated with a company. I have no financial interest in the company, other than a little bit of, call it, pride of ownership of creating the company. So we were originally funded by the US Department of Energy to create this solution for Americans all over the country. Our biggest shareholder was the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. We work very, very closely with similar agencies in New York and Connecticut and around the country. And the whole goal was to make sure that homeowners got competitive offers from really high quality providers. And they got all kinds of options of equipment, financing, type of contractor, whether they're local, whether they're regional, whether they're larger national players. And the idea was that when you have competitive offers, you end up making better decisions. Think about Amazon, think about Expedia, think about Kayak or other marketplaces that we all use. That is the concept behind Energy Sage. Energy Sage does charge a small fee. Typically, it's about 3% of the value of the transaction. But it ends up saving the solar companies up to 20%, 25% of their marketing and sales costs. So Energy Sage prices ended up being 20 to 30% lower than going to the same contractor directly. So as I said, I don't have any financial interest, but I still believe it's one of the best ways for folks to take a look at solar. Again, there is no obligation. If you don't like it, don't use it. But at least you'll have 2 or 3 options. You can literally tell your contractor, hey, I'm about to use Energy Sage. They'll right away discount their prices by several $1,000s just from that threat. Same thing with heat pumps. You've got to any big ticket item, you have to comparison shop.
Okay, thank you. Next digital hand, David Lowe, please.
Hi, thank you. Excellent program. And I wanted to return to Fran's question. Oh, before I do, Alok, I was curious if it was a recent transaction with Mass Save, because I know they used to just hand out bulbs. Now I think they do more, but you don't need to answer that. Just a thought for to chew on. We recently put in a heat pump in 2 different stages, so I wanted to respond to Fran's valid criticism. The program is still valuable because everybody needs to engage. So if people who can afford to can be hooked into making the change, then we're in a better situation as a community, as a society. But the criticism is valid. One way to approach it, we were a little bit cash strapped or watching our cash flow. And so 2-3 years ago, we put in a heat pump, which is a penetration through the wall, has nothing to do with the baseboard system we had or furnace system that we also had in the attic. We kept those at that time and supplemented so that the main rooms that we were using had a heat pump vent blowing air in. And so that switched us I don't know, I didn't do the math yet. I'd like to, a large percentage of our usage was switched to electric, but we still kept the gas. 2 years further on, just a few months ago, that wasn't enough. It wasn't quite warming the house. We were still using gas. So we added 3 more heads, one in the bedroom, one in an office, and one in the living room. And that now, between the 5 heads, 2 different systems, covers it. And we almost never use the gas. We removed the gas furnace, actually. So it can be done in stages. And how did we finance that? We did have a windfall when my mom passed away, but we ended up, instead of using it right away, we got a heat loan. It took me a weekend to get the heat loan. It blew my mind. I went on a Friday and they called me on Monday morning and they had offered it to us. They were good customers, I guess. But so that paid for the system. And I took the chunk of money that I had that I was going to put in towards it. I put it in a CD, a couple of different CDs that release funds at different times. And it will cost $250 a month for the next 7 years. But the CD takes care of the next 2 years because that money will dump into the account that's paying it. So there is a way to ease the financing. There are many ways, I guess. That's just one example I wanted to share.
So, and David, what was the interest on your heat loan?
0.
Yep, because through Mass
0%,
correct?
for 7 years, correct.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
So they give us a chunk of money, $17,000, and it's costing us $250 a month. So very affordable bites compared to laying that all out at once.
250 interest free though.
Interest free.
Interest free. Next digital hand, Mary DeWart, please.
Yes, thank you so much. I haven't.
Sorry, and the CDs pay 5%. So just sorry about that, Mary.
Oh,
sorry.
Do you want to finish more?
No, I just wanted to say that, while we're paying 0%, we're earning 5% on the money that's sitting in the CD, waiting to pay for the heating system next year. That's all I wanted to add. I'm sorry. So it was like
I really appreciate the idea of financial financial expenses is the primary determinant of people going ahead with this program. But I'm working on the Electrify Brookline campaign, and I've learned a lot. For example, I've learned that our house, for example, it was built in 1878, and I've coped with putting up fans and circulating all summer, and the house gets very warm, even though we do have insulation. It's 90 degrees out. The summers are getting hotter, and it's getting less and less tolerable to live without air conditioning. And one of the benefits of the heat pump is not just the heat, but the growing hot summers that are making sleeping and discomfort a much more primary thing. So there are other things than money that are determining people's decision making. So I'm really interested, my husband, for example, in the cooling and a heat pump concept, when I really realized it was an investment in our house and it was an investment in our health to sleep better, to have a little bit more comfortable situation. And we're pretty flexible. I mean, we can tolerate heat. We've used fans, but I think that we're bringing in the EB campaign a balanced view of finances with health. And I think people understand that with induction cooking, people understand it with other things as well. And also the fact that supposedly the number one reason people buy into helping and doing change for climate is the fact of protecting future generations and protecting life on the planet. That, as we see fires and we see floods, I think that there is a growing aspect to our financial and more self-absorbed expenses. I don't know, maybe that's not true, Vikram.
You're right. As I mentioned, I think in my list of 4, the last one, maybe I said it too fast. It is comfort and convenience. So a lot of people are taking action because of comfort and convenience. If you look at just the heat pump installation data, the peak season for heat pump installation is between April and September. And guess why? Because majority of people are installing heat pumps for air conditioning, for cooling, unfortunately. In New England, we are getting too warm. In Maine, if you look at the data, most of the heat pumps are being installed for air conditioning. Unfortunately, what is happening is the contractors that are installing those heat pumps are discouraging people from removing their fossil fuel heating systems and encouraging them to continue to use their fossil fuel systems during cold weather. So it kind of defeats the purpose of installing heat pumps that could meet both your heating and cooling needs. But I think our policy in Massachusetts is very generous. We're getting up to $10,000 of cash rebates plus no interest 7-year loans. But I believe it's being misused, misapplied towards air conditioning and not heating.
But aren't also the technologies getting more and more efficient? There's still bad press going around that heat pumps don't hit the mark in the winter season, and they can only warm your house at a certain, temperature. But that's also out of date. So the whole
that is
industry
very out of date.
is growing. But you hear older arguments, and it's not disinformation, it's just old information. And how do we keep the information current, and so people don't get perceptions and then close their interest in it?
Yeah, I think absolutely you're right. I think information is the key. So it is very commendable what Electrify Brookline is doing, bringing the information from a trusted source to say, hey, these are myths. Let's work on making sure that we are sharing facts and not old information or misinformation. We have installed heat pumps, and we've been using them 12 months of the year, both for heating and cooling, and don't have to worry about it. Even last year, if you remember, we had extremely cold days when I think we got into negative temperatures, not wind chill, but negative temperatures, and the heat pumps handled them quite well. Yeah, the bill was high. Don't get me wrong. The consumption went quite high, but may have paid maybe I track my usage every day. May have cost me $15 or $20 for a day to heat my small condo, but it worked.
And you weren't burning gas.
Yep.
Thank you. The next digital hand, Patty Correa, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. First of all, I just put something in the chat with the link to the financial incentives guide. And I want to just make sure everybody knows that there's a lot of IRA money that's going to be coming to Massachusetts late this year or early next year. That's going to have very significant rebates for low income and middle income people. So stay tuned on that, because that's intended to be huge help for people of limited means, and hopefully will be. My question is about the trajectory for heat pump, the cost of heat pump projects. Let's just set aside the cost of electricity for a moment. But we saw, huge development in rooftop solar technology. It's much more productive now. It's much more lower in cost. Can we expect to see any sort of transformation in the manufacture and marketing of the heat pump part of the equation? Thank you.
Based on my knowledge of what's happening in the industry, the price of heat pumps over the last 2 years has increased by about 20 to 30% in Massachusetts. And there are two primary reasons. One is the hardware. Even though it is more efficient, and we would want to believe that with better technology that the hardware should get cheaper, it has not. So the hardware has gone up in price. The wholesale prices have not gone up 20 or 30% by any means. But the labor cost is one of the bigger parts of the equation. As I mentioned, the peak demand periods are between April and September. And right now, if you call a heat pump contractor during those months, they will tell you they will quote you a very, very high price because they don't really need business. They are fully sold out. They rather charge a super premium price, and they will, of course, do your installation if you're willing to pay that. So the best time to install heat pumps is, call it between October and March timeframe, when you might be able to get better prices. But labor shortage is what's keeping heat pump, more contractors entering the market. And training heat pump installers is not easy, and it's not quick. So hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years, with better training programs, with better access to labor, we might be able to bring down some of the installation costs. That said, I'm a very big fan of the government programs, the ZEAB, the $10,000 rebate program, the 0% interest. But those have actually hurt the industry a little bit because it has caused a mad rush, and most of the contractors are actually making a lot more money on these installations than they should have, because there's a lot of free money. So maybe a better designed incentive program could make the market more efficient.
So I take
Vikram, a quick follow-up on that. Oh, I'm sorry, Tommy, go ahead.
So I think I don't disagree with the facts Vikram has presented about price, about installation price. I take a slightly different view, though. If you want more existing businesses to learn how to do a thing, make it profitable. If you want more people to go into that kind of a business, make it profitable. And it's true that the demand for heat pumps currently exceeds the human resource ability to install them, certainly certain times of year, right? There just aren't enough installers. That's true, right? And that if you're busy and you're in a small business, the thing to do is raise prices. The good news is that incents more people to come along and participate. And so we are seeing training programs fill up, and we're seeing demand for more existing HVAC businesses to do heat pumps, and more businesses that are HVAC adjacent to start getting into it, because, you know, there's work out there. It's also really hard because employment is so high, unemployment is so low generally. We just have tremendous pressure on labor. That's going to ease up a little bit. But functionally, a lot of this is going to be driven by whatever combination of federal and state grants, subsidies, programs, right? What the homeowner pays is going to really be a function of what Congress looks like and what they do. And, you know, if you can predict that, get off this call and go make some money and make the world a better place doing something else. So we really don't know from that perspective, right? There's also, we're seeing a much bigger demand in new construction for heat pumps than even just a few years ago. And so that's also gobbling up both labor and equipment supply. Again, though, when those prices are high, it invites more participants, and that's great because we'll have an increased capacity to install more every year going forward. It's, you know, it's sort of it's a consequence of a near-term success.
Yeah, thank you. Tommy, a specific
is...
question based on that, either Tommy and or Vikram. The state of Maine has a program where through community colleges, they're a 1-week heat pump certification program. You are certified by the state of Maine after a 1-week instructional program. They offer those sessions 2 to 3 times a year at community colleges in Maine. Is there anything like that in the pipeline for Massachusetts?
So I don't know much about that program, except that most Maine heat pumps are mini splits, where folks are putting a mini split. Does everybody know what a mini split is, right? It's a single sort of unit that goes in a single room. You can have multiple of them, right, running off the same heat pump. And in Maine, what we're seeing is the combination of folks using it for air conditioning, but also because Maine has oil heating overwhelmingly, which has a much, much higher price than natural gas per functional therm. We're seeing folks in Maine use heat pumps to heat in the spring and the fall. Right, so they'll use heat pumps until late November, early December, and then turn them back on in March. And it saves them a tank of oil every year, and it's cheaper. I don't know if we're going to see a program like that in Massachusetts. I would expect that a 1-week program allows you to install mini splits. I don't think that a 1-week program is going to get you to the point that you're installing air handling units and doing a more complex installation. But to your point, there are lots of folks doing mini splits in Massachusetts too. And if that takes off some of the burden, it sounds like a great idea. I will poke around and see what I can come up with. I haven't heard of anything exactly like that, but that doesn't mean it's not out there.
And hopefully nobody with 1 week training should be installing your heat pumps.
Wow, interesting. Interesting decision by the state of Maine then. So Bill, digital hand.
Thanks, John. I wanted to circle back to electrifying transportation. As a recent arrival here to Brookline, I was delighted to see the number of public chargers that are available and, of course, recently expanded. The thing I wanted to bring up, and some people on the call have heard this from me before, if you own your own home or you have, at least access to your driveway and you can install an outlet for your car, the cost advantage is clear. But for those of us who live in apartment buildings or condos where that's not an option, then we're relying on the public chargers. And my experience, and I've done some arithmetic, is that it's costing between 40 and 100% more to be charging an electric vehicle for a given range than for a internal combustion engine. And that takes into account the per kilowatt cost. And with the newer ones, there's a flat fee and taxes, and there's parking, and there's a flat fee for the parking if you're using the app. And when you add that all up for a given period of time for charging, it is considerably more to be charging an electric vehicle compared to gas equivalent. And so I think I'm raising a policy question, which is what's the plan for Brookline going forward if there's a goal to incentivize converting from gas-powered vehicles, diesel, whatever, to electrical vehicles, and using public chargers as a method to help do that? Because
I'll tell you,
at least economically, it's not there.
At the state level, starting in 2035 or 2036, depending on how you do the math, you won't be able to buy a new gasoline-powered vehicle. So that's a pretty strong stick. You've got some time between now and then, of course. And I will say, as someone who thinks about public policy more broadly than just climate, it's not really obvious to me that the public should be cross-subsidizing your charging your private vehicle in a public space. I don't own a car at all. And every time we have a parking spot on a residential street, that prevents us doing something that's far more fun to me, like putting on, or a commercial street, like putting out restaurant benches or something else. So I think the question of what do we do to help so-called garage orphans is really complicated. And if you come at it with the approach of, I'm entitled to own an automobile and it's going to have to be electric, what's the public going to do for me? You get one answer. But if you come at it from the approach of, hey, you can get on the T, you can ride a bike, you can walk just like a whole bunch of other people, you get a really different answer. So I don't have a real strong opinion about what Brookline should do. I think that there's a lot of public money being invested into installing chargers that are generally available to the public. And I think in the spot we are on the S-curve where we want to encourage adoption, I think that's really smart. But I don't expect that to last forever. In fact, what I expect is condominium associations to use their own fees to install chargers that are available. I expect businesses to install chargers for their customers and for their employees, because the fact of the matter is, as we install more solar, it's actually going to be daytime charging that is the most economically efficient, not nighttime charging. So the process is going to change over time, and the incentives are going to change, and the opportunities are going to change. I don't think there's a single answer. And the last thing I would remind you is, in Massachusetts, Brookline is relatively unusual. Most of Boston is less dense than North Brookline. And so this phenomenon of figuring out garage orphans is not like most of Massachusetts. It's a pretty localized problem. Sure, it's our local, but if you live in Marlboro, this is a weird problem. Everybody in Marlboro has a driveway, right? So that makes it also a little bit trickier to get broad public policy support because it's not a problem that most Americans and most people in Massachusetts will even really face. So that's just some context. I don't know what Brookline's going to do or even what they should do.
Bill, I would maybe redo the math on the numbers. Based on my math, Brookline actually subsidizes the cost of charging at 25 cents a kilowatt hour. You're looking at anywhere from 8 cents to 12 cents a mile driven on an electric car versus anywhere from 16 to 20 plus cents for a internal combustion car.
Yeah, we can certainly connect about this later, Vikram. 25 cents is the charge point baseline cost. The other chargers cost 40, 44, or 49 cents a kilowatt hour, and they are far more prominent, plus the flat fee, plus the tax, plus the parking. So that's where I'm getting the arithmetic. It's not the per kilowatt hour of the lowest cost charger. It's what's available across the spectrum. But I think Tommy made a lot of good points. Nobody's looking for a sense of entitlement like I am owed, public charging. But if there's a policy goal to use the public chargers to help incentivize, that's the question I'm raising here.
More on that subject later, obviously, right? So, okay, any additional questions? We have another 5 minutes or so. If folks have other questions, I can just a little question of great interest to me, which is the issue of solar thermal or solar hot water. In 2005, was it? 2007, the MIT Solar Decathlon House. We connected up our solar hot water, not even on the roof, but on a wall of the house, and the amount and speed that it generated fantastic hot water was just astronomical. And at that point, our whole panel cost maybe $5,000. So the future of solar hot water in Brookline, a possible viable technology?
Yeah, so my expectation is we may see it for larger users, apartment buildings, hotels, and not exclusively, but as a boost, right? If your water is set, instead of starting at 55 degrees, is starting at 65 or 75 degrees, hey, free money, right? I think it's unlikely we will see deployment for small residential because the capital cost plus the cost of the plumber, right? The installation probably exceeds the cost of heating that water, particularly if you're going to run an air source heat pump water heater. And that is sort of the obvious long-term future. I have one in my house. I love it. It was a little more expensive to buy with the Mass Save rebate included, but it works like a charm. And we're not burning any gas anymore to heat our water. So I think you will see it, again, like bigger users where they can amortize that cost over many more gallons. But I don't think it's likely to see it on ones, twos, and threes on smaller residential.
Vikram.
I love the technology. I wish there were more of them out there. I've not looked at the numbers recently, but Massachusetts was offering phenomenal incentives to install solar thermal. John, you're right. In 2007, between 7 and 12, I would say 2007 and 2012, I bet you there were a couple hundred solar thermal contractors in Massachusetts, and now there might be 5. The industry has just gone down. It does make sense to have it on every multifamily, every commercial building, as Tommy is saying. But if people who are living in 2-family, 3-family homes, if they can band together with their other neighbors and install one system, I think the numbers could work. The payback period could be less than 10 years, which is very good rate of return.
Interesting. Any final questions of any of our 4 speakers today? Okay. Basically, our next CAB meeting is scheduled for, they're almost always the second Monday of each month. And we're only the first Monday because we have very busy speakers. So the March meeting will be on Monday, March 11 at 5 p.m. Topic is still undecided, and we are still, if you have any ideas, any climate related topics you would like to discuss, let me know. And with that, I would like to thank Tommy, Vikram, Diane, Susan, and everybody for attending. And it's been a very interesting meeting. And at this point, let us consider the meeting adjourned. Thank